Hi, I'm Tom Barry, and welcome to The New Left. Thank you so much to our newest patrons, Alex Murphy, Abby, Adam Breesy, John Daly, Michael Derry, Scott Busick, Teresa Siegel, and Daniel S. The United States has been at war in the Middle East for 18 years. It's the longest running war in U.S. history, and it's spreading violently out of control. We are not in 2 wars right now, and we're not in 10. Our war on terror has spread to 80 different countries, almost half the countries on the planet. It's called Operation Enduring Freedom, and it's taken us to war in countries like, get ready for this, Afghanistan, Iraq, the Philippines, Sudan, Somalia, Djibouti, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Trinidad and Tobago, Central African Republic, Seychelles, Kenya, Mauritius, Comoros, Liberia, Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania, Algeria, Chad, Mali, Mauritania, Niger, Senegal, Nigeria, Morocco, Belize, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Honduras, Guyana, Suriname, Pakistan, Syria, Libya, and Yemen. I mean, this is insane. To help us even understand what's happening, we are just going to focus on the 8 largest wars that we're fighting today in Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Somalia, Libya, Syria, Niger, and Yemen. And we'll start with Afghanistan, the longest running war in U.S. history. We've dropped over 60,000 bombs on this country in a war that's brought nothing but death and destruction to the people of Afghanistan. This 18-year-long war has turned Afghanistan into the largest heroin supplier in the world. Every president that we elect promises to end this war, but once in office kills more people than the president before him. We are never leaving this country because there's over $1 trillion in mineral wealth buried in its mountains. And right now, the plan really is to just keep killing people for as long as it takes us to extract it. 2,400 U.S. troops have died in Afghanistan, and we have spent $2 trillion on a war that's killed an estimated 875,000 people. We spent $2 trillion, and almost 1 million people have died here. Now, let's look at Iraq, a war that we started in 2003. We invaded a country that had no way to threaten us. We toppled the government, and we started a civil war. We tortured people in Iraq, and we created violent enemies like ISIS, who we are still fighting today. And we did all of this for oil. We stole $9.5 trillion worth of oil in Iraq and gave it to corporations like BP and ExxonMobil. 4,550 U.S. troops have died in this country, and we have spent an additional $2 trillion on a war that's killed a staggering 2.3 million people. And these wars just kept spreading. And in 2003, we hired private mercenaries to start assassinations and drone bombings in Pakistan. We gave their government $30 billion worth of weapons, and we launched 430 drone strikes in a war that's killed an estimated 325,000 people. We did this because we found $6 trillion worth of oil in Pakistan, and ExxonMobil controls it. 325,000 people died for this oil, and we are still fighting in Pakistan today. Now, speaking of endless war, let's look at Somalia, a war that we've been fighting since 2007. In a move that can only be described as insane, we armed an army of Ethiopians and asked them to invade Somalia. They butchered the citizens and toppled the government, which plunged Somalia into a hellhole of chaos and violence that continues to this day. People are fleeing their homes, and they're caught between drone bombs and jihadis. We think that 650,000 people have died in this war, and we did this for oil. We found $7 trillion worth of oil reserves off the coast of Somalia. So we invaded the country, toppled the government, and killed 650,000 people. This became our standard operating procedure in a regime change war. Which brings us to the war in Libya. Before we arrived, Libya had the best infrastructure in Africa. And its people had things like free electricity and 0% interest loans. Today, it's a lawless state full of violence, slavery, and torture. We actually armed and trained Al-Qaeda terrorists to start a civil war in Libya. We overthrew the government and we murdered all the black people. All black Libyans were branded as foreign mercenaries, and we ethnically cleansed an entire town of 30,000 people. The leader of Libya, Gaddafi, gave up his nuclear weapons to try and make peace with us, and in return, he died a brutal death, getting anally raped with a bayonet. 250,000 people have died in this war, and there are actually open-air slave markets in Libya now. There are more slaves in the world right now today than at any time in human history because of us. We started this war because Libya wanted to create their own currency that would compete with the dollar and the euro. And we are still at war there today because we stole $3 trillion worth of oil and we gave it to corporations like ConocoPhillips and Total. We armed terrorists, we murdered all the black people, and we stole their oil, and then we tried to do the exact same thing to Syria. In 2011, the CIA armed and trained terrorists to start a civil war in Syria, just like we did in Libya, except this time our coup failed. So, we launched a massive bombing campaign that killed hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians and turned Syria's cities to rubble. But our coup failed again, and there are still over 1,000 U.S. troops fighting in Syria today. 1.5 million people have died in this war, and 6 million people have lost their homes. We did this because Saudi Arabia and ExxonMobil wanted to build a natural gas pipeline through Syria, and Assad said no. So we armed terrorists, killed 1.5 million people, and stole all their oil. After we armed all of these terrorists in the Middle East, those same Al-Qaeda terrorists took their weapons and spread out across Africa, which led us to a whole host of new wars like the war that we're fighting in Niger. In 2013, we sent troops and started drone bombing Niger to protect the $28 billion worth of uranium and $63 billion worth of oil that we stole and gave to corporations. Despite Niger being rich in resources, it's the second least developed country in the world. The people there are sick and dying. They're forced to work the uranium mines with their bare hands as they die horrific deaths from radiation sickness. And millions more people are dying of cholera and malnutrition. 4 U.S. troops have died in Niger, and who knows how many people we've killed because there are no statistics. This is just another faceless war where we pretend that we're the good guys as we rob and murder poor people. Finally, let's look at the war crime that we are committing right now in Yemen. In 2015, the government of Yemen was overthrown in a civil war, so we helped Saudi Arabia starve the people of Yemen through what's called siege warfare. We cut off food and aid to the country, and then we started bombing innocent civilians. Hospitals, schools, women, children, everyone. What we are doing here is downright evil, and as far as I can tell, the plan really is to kill every last man, woman, and child in this country. We have already murdered 85,000 children, 175,000 people have died, and 12 million people are starving to death right now. Are we really going to murder 12 million people in Yemen? At this point, do I even have to say that this is about oil? Saudi Arabia is building a giant oil port and pipelines through Yemen, and we are willing to kill every single person in this country to help them get it done. We killed 85,000 kids for oil. It's estimated that in total, over 6 million people have died in our wars since 9/11. 6 million people are dead because of us. That's how many Jewish people died in the Holocaust. We are modern day war criminals. We arm terrorists. We overthrow democracies. We commit torture and we murder children. We force our troops, the courageous people sworn to protect us, to die in oil wars. 22,000 active duty U.S. military members have died since 9/11, but it's not war that kills our troops, it's suicide. 22 military veterans commit suicide every single day in the United States. That's 8,000 suicides a year. 144,000 vets have killed themselves since 9/11, and this is an abomination. 1 out of every 3 people in this world has had their country bombed by the United States of America, and we have spent $7 trillion killing 6 million people. We spend trillions of dollars killing women and children, and we do this while 1 out of every 6 Americans lives in poverty, and half this country can't afford a $500 emergency. Our water is full of lead, our infrastructure is crumbling, and there are third world diseases popping up in America. We kill 30,000 poor people every year in this country by denying them health care, and we have 500,000 Americans living on the streets right now eating out of garbage. Life expectancy is going down in America, not up. We are a sick country that has impoverished its citizens in order to kill 6 million people. Future generations are going to look back on us with horror, wondering what sort of monsters could do the things that we've done. As Congresswoman Barbara Lee said, we have become the great evil that we deplore. If we don't end these wars, then this is the legacy that we are going to leave behind. We will live on in history as the great butchers of this world.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to click like and subscribe. Also, be sure to ring that bell if you'd like notifications when we release new videos. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at We Are The New Left, and if you would like to see more videos like this, please consider supporting the show on Patreon or donating.